I've been here about 2 years, and my role here is Wellbeing Advisor. So I work within the Reward and Wellbeing team within people, HR if you like. We call ourselves people. So that's me, and I'll hand you over to my colleague Aishwarya.
Hi, everybody. I'm Aishwarya, and I work along with Suzie at the Wellcome Trust. I work in an entirely different department, floor, and team. But I have to argue, I think Suzie has one of the better seats. I sit on the 8th floor with the Corporate Affairs Department, and I am within their brand team, and my role is the brand officer. And in a nutshell, what we work on is trying to communicate different aspects of the Wellcome Trust, most importantly, trying to build trust in our brand and also in coming to understand as an organization who we are, who we believe in, and how we want the world to see us. And separate from that entirely, and I know I'm going to pass back to Suzie here, is the Menopause Cafe, which is what we work on together at Wellcome. So I'm speaking for myself, but I'm so excited to be here today and to tell you a little bit more about the Menopause Cafe, how it came to be, what we try to achieve with it, and also just this beautiful space that it's come to be. And very, very excited to take on any questions and hopefully try and share if you are interested in starting something of your own. So going back to Suzie, and it's a wonderful story of how it came to be, and she's going to talk us through that.
Thanks, Aishwarya. So Aishwarya co-founded the Menopause Cafe with myself and a colleague of ours who isn't with Wellcome anymore. It all came about from World Menopause Day. A couple of years ago, we wanted to do something, weren't quite sure what to do, so we wrote an article with Aishwarya's help, popped it on our intranet, and got some response from that, as you hopefully do. We had, and we'll go into that a bit later, but we do have an organisation that helps us externally to support menopause for our colleagues. But we wanted to do more, and just having an off-the-cuff conversation with Aishwarya, we talked about, shouldn't we do something more than this? And I said, well, we could start a menopause cafe, and her eyes lit up. And I thought, well, yes, we actually could do this. The reason for that for me was where I'd worked previously. We'd actually had a menopause employee network separate from the Women's Employee Network and the Wellbeing Employee Network. Colleagues of mine there had started a specific menopause network, and I'd supported them with that. I'd co-founded a Wellbeing Network there. So I kind of had an idea of how to go about this and the work that they'd done. And also, where I'd worked before, we'd been involved with Ruby Wax's Frazzled cafes for mental health. And I knew how those worked. And that's the genus really for the idea of having a menopause cafe, was that it was a space, very informal, peer-to-peer support, but with somebody almost facilitating it, so that if the conversation dried up, there was somebody there to say, well, have you thought about, or and have you got any hints and tips? So we threw the idea around a little bit between us and came up with this idea of having a room within the building. We have thus since gone on to do online as well, but to book a meeting room once a month and just invite people to come and sit and talk to each other. I have biscuits. We tell people to bring a cuppa. We have tissues. I have some posters, some books. But the biggest thing is it's very, very informal. It's just a conversation, and it can go in any direction whatsoever around the menopause. Aishwarya, do you want to tell us about your hook to get you into this, so your involvement and your background within menopause?
Yes, definitely. And while I do have good genetics, I am definitely not of the age of going through perimenopause quite yet. So for me, the into menopause is a little different. Before joining the Wellcome Trust, I was a researcher, and I conducted research on lived experiences of menopause, and it was qualitative research. And you might wonder, once again, why someone in their master's interested in menopause research. And for me, I had worked as a science journalist for about 4 years before joining the Wellcome Trust. And during that time, I had written about all sorts of topics. I communicated basically research from India that was happening by Indian researchers, whether within or outside of the country. So I talked about topics ranging from very deeply intricate genetic research to snow leopard research that happens in the Himalayas. And all through this time, I had not come across research on menopause. So when I was approached by a femtech company to write articles for their website about their newly launching products on helping Indian women with perimenopause, they asked me to write about specifically the Indian audience. And so, much to my surprise, though I'm no longer surprised, when I went out and I looked for research, I found absolutely nothing. The only research paper I did find about menopause was about the average age of menopause in India, which is 47. Interestingly, about 4 years younger than the global average age that we look to in our West counterparts. So needless to say, I did not write for the femtech company. There were several ethical issues, but I did go up and decide to do an entire research study on menopause experiences in India. And as you can imagine, menopause experiences are varied across the globe, and also just within these tiny cultural elements as well, because it depends on so much. And during that time, I learned as a biology, I have a biology and neuroscience background. I did learn about that side of menopause, but what I was more interested in learning about was the sociology of it, of how societies interact with menopause, how people feel supported or unsupported during their perimenopause. And so I not just learned that perimenopause lasts between 7 to 10 years, something that I'm still in shock over. I also learned that there are so many support systems and structures that are needed to help people go through it. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't receive that. But with Suzie and with the Menopause Cafe, there's one element of this structure that we've become part of for so many people at Wellcome, which is within employment and within workspaces, how people can feel supported. And Suzie is a huge, huge advocate for, and we're going to hear more about it, I'm sure, about peer-to-peer support and how that is something that people really, really respond to. And during my research as well, while I learned about so many things that they would like from their workplaces, from their families, from the environment, from the medical practices, from their doctors that people would like when it comes to menopause, what I learned the most, what was the most significant thing that I took away, was that at the end of each interview, the person that I was interviewing always felt the most, just they felt so light that they got to speak about their experience for probably the first time in their lives. And so at the Menopause Cafe, we've had people from all age groups, from different backgrounds. We've had men, women, genders, all alike. And so it's not just people coming and sharing their experiences. It's people who are coming to ask about, how can I support my mother? That was a question that we had recently. And so it's been absolutely amazing to see that everyone is coming and understanding that they belong to some sort of menopause support network. It's only if you look around that you realize that there's someone who could use your support. Passing on to Suzie to talk about peer-to-peer support.
Thank you, Aishwarya. I don't have the depth of research that Aishwarya has, but I have lived experience. So I'm 51. So I am 4 years into my postmenopause. I went through the end of my perimenopause and into my menopause day during lockdown, which was interesting. And also I have multiple sclerosis. And that's an interesting dichotomy as well. If you do have an underlying health condition and then you're going through menopause as well, I always said I'm either going to sail through it because 24 of the symptoms are exactly the same for MS and perimenopause, or it's going to be a double whammy. And I actually ended up sailing through it. So I think I got off lightly. What I was lucky is that I knew a bit through the peer-to-peer support I'd had at my last employer. So I wasn't going into this with no knowledge. It was about the time that Davina stepped forward as well, Davina McCall, and people started talking about it in the media. So again, that helped. The conversation was opening up. So in terms of the peer-to-peer support angle, Aishwarya has already said it is an inclusive cafe. We invite everybody. I had a colleague email me to say, look, I'm a dad, I've got 2 teenage daughters, there's my wife, can I come and be part of the conversation? We said, absolutely, of course you can. We have had people coming in and wanting to support parents. Also, the younger generation just wanting to learn. I think for me, it's twofold. So it is that peer-to-peer support that you are going through it now. You want to talk about specific symptoms, or you want to share ways of mitigating what you're going through. You want to share your journey trying to get HRT or whatever treatment that you've ended up having, or just things that you've bought online that have really helped. Weighted blankets was a big one. That people didn't know about, and suddenly it's like, oh, it really helps you when you sleep and you're going through your flushes and your insomnia, and a weighted blanket really helps. I guess the other piece for me though is that peer-to-peer support, and there's that knowledge piece as well. So you know what you know, and until you get in a room and talk to people about it, and we always say no question is a silly question. You need to feel comfortable. So we were very careful to make it feel like a psychologically safe space as well. What's said in the Menopause Cafe stays in the Menopause Cafe. And you'll be amazed at what people will talk about when you state that. The online sessions that we have done, we have not recorded. We never would. It's just you're in the room, you're having that conversation. We have, as I said, promoted our support that we do have. We have an organisation that we work with called Pepe, but there's many organisations out there that do support specifically menopause. Pepe does lots of different life stage health support, and we take that all on, but menopause is one of them. And then there's other companies, like I know Hempicked did some work with my last employer. But it's if you've got that support in your organisation, that helps as well, because you're not just having that conversation and saying, well, that's it, thank you very much. You can signpost people to where they can go for additional support. Some of the conversations, especially when we started, what people are struggling with, they'll tell you everything, but then the workplace does come up as well. And obviously from Aishwarya, my point of view, that's the support that we want to offer people, because they're in a working environment. So a lot of talk happens about, how do I talk to my line manager about it? How do I, take time off when I need to? And then you start having conversations that go slightly back before menopause, and just start talking about menstruation in general. And then it ticks over sometimes, depending on the audience, about just general aging. And as I said, sometimes that conversation can go absolutely anywhere. But with a facilitator in the room, you have somebody who can maybe sort of pull it back a bit, or say, tell me more about that. So I would say, in order to build a cafe, you need somewhere you can advertise it within your organisation. We use lifts, posters. I have a poster now. We have a brand that we've built that goes up 2 weeks beforehand on a monthly basis, and everybody says, oh, Menopause Cafe. People know it now. It's just part of the wellbeing support that we offer. So there's advertising it. And I got my comms team to help me write the poster. I'm not comms, and they did it really well and made it so inclusive that it's very obvious that everybody is welcome. Then you obviously need a place to have it. So a nice room, find something that feels a bit comfortable. If you can get away from the boardroom type space, if you can, that's better. Comfy chairs, that helps. We have an area on our 9th floor that is a bar one night a week, but it also has big sofas there. It's quite light and airy, and we find that if it's a comfortable, relaxed atmosphere, people will have comfortable, relaxed conversations. So that's your place to have it. And then it's that facilitator. So it's somebody who has a passion about it, who wants to talk about it, and who is willing to tell you everything that they've been through. So you need that person who maybe, like me now, is able to just talk about it because they enjoy talking, but they've had that lived experience, or they're really passionate about it. And that doesn't have to come through your women's network. Anybody could pop up and be that person, but you need to find them because they're the advocate. And then somebody who's able to signpost to the support you have. So get your wellbeing team or your benefits team on board so that they're there in the background. The last online one we did, we invited somebody from Pepe to come and talk. So they talked through exactly the support that was available. And then I had those slides and offered them out to the people who were online. And then also went and offered them to our wellbeing our network, our women's network as well. So they have the slides now as well. So that's kind of the physical, what we do. Aishwarya, do you want to sort of talk about what you've seen? Because you've been to most of them, sort of almost the how it's moved on from the first ones we did to maybe we are now, and sort of the points that you've seen that are of interest.
Absolutely. Thank you, Suzie. And the introduction that Suzie gives of the setup of how we've aimed to build the cafe, both in a way that's inclusive and a way that's establishing a safe space, but also in a way that's transferable so that other organizations with the Wellcome, like with other staff networks or other people, can build upon it, can bounce upon it. Because at the end of the day, as Suzie says, we're here to signpost to workplace support alongside having these conversations in a way that people can come and feel like they can be honest and also feel like they can feel supported. And these menopause cafes that we've been having, it started last January. Is that right, Suzie? Last January. So it started last January. As Suzie said, we've had a couple of online sessions as well. And I would say the core of it has really remained the same, where, as Suzie said, the role of the facilitator is so important, because sometimes you go into a menopause cafe and there are 15 people and all of them are very excited and they have something on their chest, or they've come with a question, or they're ready to share. But sometimes it's someone who's really shy and doesn't know where to begin. And this has been the format of the menopause cafes. And you can tell when you enter the room what kind of energy it's going to feel like that day. Because since we're catering to people across the organization, you get people who are coming in with different things on their minds. We've had people who come in because they're in the thick of the perimenopause right there and then, and they have felt like they've had an experience and they have to share it. And they don't necessarily want to share it in a way that leads to action, perhaps something at work, perhaps something with their manager that they've not been very happy about. And they just want to air it out and to say that this has happened. But not necessarily with a way that they want to create action, really just a way so they can get it off their chest. But you also have someone who's saying, I have been having the worst hot flashes at night. What do I do? And as Suzie said, that was actually an incredible menopause cafe session, because there's someone else who was like, I use a cooling weighted blanket and it has changed my life. And this person went and bought it the same evening and hasn't stopped talking about it since. So we've had all sorts of experiences come into this menopause cafe. And I think something that's been one of my favorite is that when you open up the conversation, I know that we're talking here today on behalf of a lot of menstruation research, all different topics, but when you open up the conversation for perimenopause or menopause, you open up the door to menstruation research in general. And I think that's such a beautiful thing, because when you create a safe space, it hopefully, if it's done right, it's a safe space for all. It's a safe space for all experiences. So we've also had people come in and if they've shared, we've gone into conversations about how they've had painful periods. And while they can relate to very heavy bleeding that some people have during perimenopause, they also have it because of perhaps endometriosis or PCOS. So at the core of it, because so many symptoms are overlapping with different menstruation related problems, different reproductive diseases that they might be having, or just some experience that they're having, because not all menstruation is typical. For example, I myself have PCOS, so my menstruation changes every single month. So when we've opened up that conversation to someone with perimenopause, it's beautiful, because you have people from all different ages having all different experiences, but there might be that one symptom that they feel like they can relate to, and they come in and they have that space to share. For example, for me, with my PCOS, a symptom that I have is hot flashes. So I have hot flashes every single month before my period begins. So I've actually learned a lot about how to deal with hot flashes because of these menopause cafes. And I think that really, it taps into what we're trying to do with the menopause cafe, which is there's a supportive environment that anyone can share anything that they feel like affects them at work because of their menstruation, typical, atypical, or menopause related. And we've had these cafes change over time because, of course, Suzie and I have become a bit more comfortable with how to lead and how to facilitate. And I think something for me, something that I've learned that's so important is that silence is actually a hugely important tool, because a lot of people might be coming in and they might have something on their mind. And while, of course, you can start a conversation, sometimes silence helps. And we've had this when someone has needed that time before suddenly coming in saying, okay, I need to talk about a lot of different things. I just didn't know where to start. I just need a little bit of time. And that's why the Menopause Cafe, even though, and Susie, please correct me about the time, it's not a full hour, but the room is always booked for an hour, because sometimes people need a little bit more time to get comfortable with where they are and who they're with. And that includes people who are not going through menopause. We've had managers who have come in and said, I want to be a better manager, so I'm here to listen, so I can listen to what other people might need from me. And it was a very welcoming space for them, because there were a lot of people, including the person who benefited from the cooling weighting blanket, going, tell your employee about cooling weighted blankets. And so that's happened as well. So I think the summary really is that it's been an incredible journey. Sometimes there have been 15 people who have so many different things to say, and sometimes there's just been one person who has needed a little bit of time before taking up the entire time to talk about how they would love to support their mother and they don't know where to start. So passing back to Susie, but also saying to Kay and to anyone in the room or online, please do send us your questions. We'd love to talk to you about how we can help you build a menopause cafe or anything that's on your mind as well.
I think my last piece before I throw it open, we did go through our people leadership team. I did write a one-pager. We did get sign off for this to happen, and then we just ran with it. And I think it's good if you can get support from your senior leaders within your organization, just so they know it's happening, and also get them to promote it. One thing about Wellcome Trust is we are for predominantly people who identify as female, which is unusual for a lot of organizations. And our Women of Wellcome network is very strong. So there's been a lot of MS Brains just kicked in, a lot of opportunity for us to get the message out there through our network, through our LGBTQ plus network. So we're just utilizing the channels that we have within the organization. But I think you just need to almost embed it as part of, it's a normal thing to have within an organization now. And you might not call it a menopause cafe, you might do it differently. It's whatever suits where you are, how you work, when you work. But I think, as Ashwari has alluded to, it's having a safe space for people to talk, feel. So I always have a box of tissues there. Some people might get upset. I'll share my favourite story. This is my last bit. We had somebody who came to us. She'd been struggling to get to see somebody about HRT. I think we all know how the NHS is under such pressure at the moment, and to get to see somebody who is a menopause specialist within the NHS can be very difficult. She actually ended up using our private medical insurance, but I guess the story is she had 40 minutes with a menopause specialist, and she came out of that going, it's changed my life, because she's now got the medication that she wanted. They didn't get it right the first time. She had to change, but she just went, I'm me again. I feel like me again. And she'd heard about the option to do that with our private medical insurance through the Menopause Cafe. So it's having that knowledge to say to people, are you aware that there is this within the organisation that can help you, and external as well, and being able to say to people, I've read a great book. The first couple we did, people were sending book recommendations and podcast recommendations in. It feels like everybody's supporting everybody, rather than just Ashwari and I sat there going, well, you could do this or you could do this. It's that peer-to-peer piece that really makes it a joyful place to go. It's my highlight of the month when we do them. I always look forward to them, and I always come away from them, as Ashwari said, feeling lighter and feeling that we've helped people have helped each other, and I feel like I've been helped. Kay, we're going to throw back to you. Okay, we can't hear you online. Wow, Vancouver. Hello. Don't think I quite understand the question. Wider menstrual equity community. Don't have one, don't know what that is. We have literally built this in-house. I guess the nearest thing I have is knowing other networks, other organizations that do this. I tend to go to wellbeing conferences, and it's every so often somebody will pop up and talk about menopause in that, and then I'll go and talk to them about Menopause Cafe and what they're doing within this space. But in terms of reaching out to other organizations, no, honestly, we haven't. This is very much internal, in-house. It's for us, by us. We'd be happy to talk to anybody about it, which is why obviously we're here. But in terms of anything more than that, because we just took this upon ourselves to do. But do absolutely, if you want to chat, we'll chat through sort of how we do it, what we do. That's fine. But I guess I would say just do it and see. Get out there, start talking about it, get people to talk who are passionate about it, who are willing to share their experiences, and see what happens. At the end of the day, you can do it once and nobody can turn up, or you can do it once and 50 people can turn up. You won't know until you actually start it. And don't think if only one person has turned up that it hasn't worked, because that one person may be the person who really needs the support. So don't look at it as numbers. Just think about anybody who walks away feeling supported. It's a success. Aishwarya, anything else?
Exactly what Suzie said as well. And I think, so basically the question for those who can't access the chat is, are you supported by your wider menstrual equity community? And have you noticed if it's the same group looping in or different politics? And I think from the experience that I shared, possibly because of a lack of another menstrual equity community within the organization, is why we have people coming into the Menopause Network, Menopause Cafe as well, to speak about their menstrual experiences that are non-menopause related. And I think it's again, as Suzie said, we're very much in-house, and there's not much of contact with the outside world with response to them coming into the Menopause Cafe. But because of being a menstruation researcher myself, this is a space that I keep in touch with myself, so that I'm able to help people when they want to know about the recent research that's been happening. And we do have a lot of questions that ask specifically, what about in this particular cultural context or in this particular group of people? And I do go back and I do some research myself to get back to them with that answer. So yes, very much an in-house thing right now. But yeah, we would love to speak to anybody. Yeah. I think there's a question online.
Hi, just checking. You can hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
All right, thank you, Suzie and Aishwarya. That I've been making some notes then, because my interest in menopause is threefold. One of them is that I research premenstrual dysphoric disorder, and it can lead to like a really debilitating perimenopause for people who are at predisposition to that. I'm also about to, I think, take on the chair role of our university's Menopause Network, and I'm also in a personal capacity, I'm in early surgical menopause, So I've got an interest in how you get different types of menopause and different types of menopause support required. So kind of like the whole thing there. So I've just been taking some notes because I really love the idea of the Menopause Cafe. Yeah, I don't have a question. I'm just saying that I've been taking some notes and I've taken some of your good ideas. And when we have our next Menopause Network meeting at the University of the West of Scotland, I think I'll take some of these things that you've suggested. And I like the idea of just, we have lots of different campuses, but maybe trialing out face-to-face cafe type thing. And like you're saying, it's not about the numbers, but more about making a difference to some people. So thanks for sharing, and I'll take on board what you've said.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, it's absolutely not a numbers game. Even the cafes where we've had just one person, we've been able to have such fruitful, beautiful conversations for that entire 40 minutes with them about what their experience has been like as well. And thank you for sharing your menopause experience too. Within the cafe as well, we've had people who have come because of surgical menopauses or chemical menopauses, early menopauses, late menopauses. So yeah, there's so many experiences to learn from and so many things to be shared. And there's always a way in. There's always one thing that that you're able to connect to with when it comes to them. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
So there's a question in the meeting chat asking, wonder how much you've managed to influence changes in the workplace and what recommendations you have for others. I think for us, we have worked closely with the Women of Wellcome Network, the Employee Network. So they did an entire piece in Women's History Month around fertility. And part of that was talking about menopause. So that's sort of joint work that we've done together. We've been promoting Pepe, and I think getting that out there and telling people that that support is there has been really instrumental. And we've actually seen the stats from Pepe recently, and we're well above average for their organizations that they work with in terms of our size and how many people have actually signed up for the menopause track. So that makes me very, very happy. I think the other piece is just being able to have people talk through how they then have those conversations with line managers, how they can go back into their teams and talk about it. And it's those small incremental changes that make the difference. If you empower people to be able to have that conversation, if you can give them the language, if you can say, look, this is what I need. And I think that's been the big thing, is for people to be able to go back and say, actually, I actually need to maybe sometimes just leave that meeting because I'm having a hot flash. But a lot of people suffer in silence and don't have that conversation. So it's being able to say to people, that's okay to do that. And maybe have conversations with, I can't really do this afternoon because my brain fog's kicked in, but I'll do it tomorrow for you. So it's those really small things that you can do, which aren't that small, but that's changing the way that menopause is seen within the organization. And the fact that you've got posters up saying we're having a menopause cafe then just puts it out there that is something that is okay to talk about all the time. Anybody can have a conversation about it. So I think having that advertised and normalizing it, that makes a difference within an organization. So for me, that's if that's what we've done, if I can walk into a lift and somebody says to me, oh, menopause cafe, and they'll have that conversation in a lift with lots of other people, that's great. That means we've made a massive difference. Aishwarya, anything else from that?
I wanted to touch upon something that you said about suffering in silence. And I think it's one of the most interesting things, because one session that we had was everyone just talking about why they were suffering in silence, or why they had come from a place of period stigma, or where they weren't used to talking about their periods. And yes, there were laughing and bonding moments of how maybe they used to hide their pads when they went to the bathroom in school. But what came out of that conversation was just, I guess, feeling a little bit more confident that, we don't have to be this way anymore. And so just having a whole menopause cafe where everyone was talking about how they had gotten so used to not talking about it, they then were able to leave and have these conversations with more people. And it's something that Suzie said earlier on as well, which is to get advocates from leadership teams, to have people talk about this who have face value as well. Because anytime there's been a new senior leader that's joined and I've met them, I've always asked them, have you been to a menopause cafe? So it's really the way to start as well, is just to make sure that people know about it. And as Suzie said, having a poster in the lift about a menopause cafe proves that you can talk about it.
And we did have a senior, one of our executive leadership team, he came, he has 2 daughters, so he wanted to know about it. He came and sat with us. And to be fair, before I even got here, Wellcome Trust did have something called Project Period, where there are free sanitary products in every single bathroom, all genders. And that's there, they're free for everybody. So the graduates actually put that in place. So that was already there. So it did give us a bit of a springboard as well, I think, to sort of keep going with what we're trying to do as well. I'm happy to stay on for a bit longer if anybody does have questions. I know, Aishwarya, you need to drop off at some point, don't you?
In a couple of minutes to get a wisdom tooth yanked out of me.
It's a couple of people just typing. Marie, do you want to bring yourself off mute?
Okay, good morning, everyone.
Hi.
I'm sorry I come late in the session. Hi. It is an interesting section, and I'm surprised about the menopause cafe. And I thought that it was not a taboo in Europe. So based off the little I hear, I'm wondering if in Europe you need to talk about menopause cafe. I wonder in Africa, because I think it's a very taboo. I have never heard people talking about menopause in Africa. So I don't have a question. I was just to a comment. Sorry for my English. Or just a comment to say that it's a good idea, and I didn't know nothing about menopause. I think it's very important to engage discussion, and because I think many women can be frustrated. I think in Africa particularly, they can be frustrated for this period. But if you prepare them well before, and also prepare the men, it's very important. Because in my presentation, I will do a presentation. We went in the rural area. We talk about menstrual health, and we implicate men in the discussion, and we had a very good result. Because sometimes they are frustrated because men don't have information. If you give the good information to the men, they will combine their women in the process. So thank you very much.
That's fantastic, Marie, and that's why we make sure that we invite everybody, because you need to be able to support people going through this. It's really difficult if you are going through it and your partner doesn't know anything about what you're having to deal with, because it's such a physical change, and it's also a mental change as well. So you may start forgetting things, or you may be very tired, and if they know why, then maybe there's a bit more empathy there when you're going through it. So yeah, it's so important to make sure that you have that support. But brilliant work you're doing, obviously.
Yes. And when in your experiences, do you feel that men was also concerned by this topic?
I think if they have a female partner, or they have daughters, yes. I think that's when they have to live through it themselves, or they know they're going to be living through it and dealing with it. I think that's when they come forward, which is great, because it is a conversation for everybody. 51% of the world goes through this at some point. So it seems ridiculous that it's not talked about a lot more in normal conversation. I'm at the age where all my peers, all my friends are going through it, and they now talk about it openly. But we didn't do that in our 40s. It took us to get to now our 50s, and we're going through it to talk about it. I want the next generation, I want the 25-year-olds now to have the conversation so they know when they get here, they already know what's coming, they know how to cope with it, they are educated. So that's the next big piece for me, is to move the dial from 50 to 40 to 30 back to 20, and to have that conversation and know what's coming for them. And then they can make informed choices. The choices will be better.
Yeah. And something that I found in my research was that the husbands of a lot of the interviewees, a lot of the men that I interviewed, the reason why they had never even asked the question or talked about menopause or thought that it was something to talk about was because their mothers never talked about it. And the assumption was, therefore, if my mom didn't tell me about this, it can't be hard. It must be very easy. It's natural. So then the whole conversation becomes about, it's natural, so it must be good. And so that's the little bit of extra effort that has to happen, because they are used to not hearing about it. And therefore changing that to something to say that, no, you should be asking about it, that requires a couple of step changes. And so starting the conversation once and just letting them know that, just by the way, it's not easy. Then you kind of see a light bulb moment in a lot of them where they realize, oh, it's not. Maybe I should ask some questions about it. So there are a couple of step changes, but it's not impossible. Suzie, you're on mute.
Nearly got through it all without doing that. So I think we need to close it down now, because they'll need the room for another meeting, I think. But thank you so much, everybody who's still online. Thank you, those in the room, if you can still hear us. Really enjoyed it. Aishwarya and I were very excited to do this, and hopefully you can take some of this forward and create a space to talk about menopause in your organizations.
Yes, thank you all so much. And please get in touch if you have any questions. If you want to talk about this, I've popped our emails in the chat. Suzie, please make sure that's right. And yes, hope to speak to some of you soon.
Thank you. Thanks.